Hey, it's Schmix, and today we're going to be talking about all of the most wanted bosses that could be added to Grounded 2. For each one, I'll drop a quick description, a signature mechanic, and the kind of loot that could change the way you play the game forever. If any of these need to be in the game, be sure to let me know in the comments down below, and if you just want to skip ahead to your favorite, timestamps are in the description. Alright, let's kick things off with the boss we've all heard so much about, the Tarantula. For those of you that didn't know, there is a Tarantula coming to Grounded 2, and his name is Axel. If you look right above the ice cream cart on the map, you can find an empty terrarium with the name Axel on it. And when the game first dropped, there used to be a receipt there that said he was bought that same day from Noah's Pet Shop. Additionally, we've also found Axel's arena in the top left part of the map near the pine tree. This place is absolutely huge, and this is where we're going to be taking on the Tarantula. Now, there are a few attacks that are confirmed when it comes to Axel. We know he has a burrow attack where he goes under the ground, a hair attack where he fires venomous hairs at us, and that he also has super potent venom. So we're not talking wolf spider venom, something much stronger, as well as a few slashing and biting attacks. Now, after we defeat Axel the Tarantula, there is some confirmed loot coming to Grounded 2, starting off with the Tarantula Throne, and this one I am absolutely going to be crafting. Next, we know we are getting the Tarantula chest that has 60 slots of storage. We're also getting a Tarantula candle and some other decor. When it comes to weapons, the developers have revealed that we are getting a Tarantula great bow. Alongside this, there's something in the files called a great arrow for each of the arrows that we have in the game currently. Additionally, we'll be getting Tarantula daggers, a Tarantula spear, and Tarantula armor as well. I'm guessing this is going to be Ranger type armor because the devs were really specific about revealing the Tarantula great bow. However, I would love it if they added a weapon of each archetype when it came to the Tarantula boss. Regardless, I am super excited to see the Tarantula come to Grounded 2. As far as a release date, we do not have an exact date yet, but we know it is coming this fall. Now, the Tarantula boss is the only known boss that is confirmed to be coming to Grounded 2, so we're going to start with some of the bosses that may have been in Grounded 1, or that had been developed and never made it into the game. Starting off with the Ant Queen bosses that were in Grounded 1. So these guys were completely harmless to the player, and they had a really cool mechanic where you could either befriend them by feeding them their favorite snack, or kill them by feeding them a poison snack. And this would actually influence what you got, being a pet or armor in Grounded 1. I know a lot of people want to see a fight for the ant bosses, and there actually are some cut content with different sounds and attacks in the files, so this might be coming to Grounded 2. However, I think that they should stay neutral. It just makes a lot of sense for the game and preserves the uniqueness of that mechanic. However, I do want to note that I would love to see wars between different species of ants, such as the red ants going to war against the black ants. As far as dropped items go, obviously in Grounded 1, if you befriended it, you would get a pet, and if you killed it, you would get armor, weapons, and some decor. And I think this would be really similar for Grounded 2. I really want them to lean into making an ant type for each tier, maybe termites in tier 4, but then a tier 5 type ant, and then giving each ant type a different staff, which would be in the mage class. Overall, ant queens, I really hope they return to Grounded 2. I think they will because ants are a very big part of the game, and I am so excited to see this happen. Moving on to the Termite Queen, this would be such a cool concept. We had a Termite King in Grounded 1, but obviously it doesn't make sense to have a termite colony without a termite queen. So this would be an absolute necessity if they plan to add termites to Grounded 2. Now the termite queen would be found deep within the royal chamber alongside the termite king. She would summon termite workers and soldiers, which we saw from Grounded 1, but she would also shoot a dust storm attack, and then it would make sense if near the final stage of the attack she summoned in the termite king to defend her. When we finally beat this boss, she would drop items to make mage type armor, including the royal crown, which could buff dust damage, the sandstorm staff, which would create dust clouds to limit visibility for players and enemies and deal damage over time, as well as other decor and items that we could use for base building. Now next up is the Wasp Queen. This is a boss fight from Grounded 1 where you would enter the hive and summon in the Wasp Queen. Now the Grounded devs made sure to tell us that there would be no returning bosses. However, my theory is that because they're making bigger, badder bosses for Grounded 2, this boss might return to the game but just as a normal type creature. And honestly, it doesn't quite make sense to have wasps in the game without a Wasp Queen. As far as the fight goes, it would have similar mechanics to Grounded 1. The Wasp Queen would have several dive attacks and sting attacks, as well as summoning in other wasps during the fight. Once you finally kill the boss, the item drops would be similar to Grounded 1, which you received a super fast bow and an archer type helmet. I think it would be cool if they expanded and made an entire set for this, but this would definitely be archer type armor. Regardless, I think the Wasp Queen definitely has a place in Grounded 2, and it just wouldn't quite feel realistic without a Wasp Queen boss. Now following the Wasp Queen is the Queen Bee. I'm not sure why these guys aren't already in the game, because where there are bees, there is obviously a queen bee as well. This would be another harmless type boss similar to the ant queen bosses, and you would be able to befriend or kill this boss as well. However, where it would differ from the ant queen bosses is that you would either receive a bee mount from befriending it, or various weapons and armor for killing it. And just like the ants, I know a lot of people want to see a fight for this boss, and I think they should probably just stay the harmless neutral boss that they are, but I do want to see wars between different species of bees as well, as we know there are killer bees coming to Grounded 2. If you chose to kill this boss, it would drop items to make ranger type armor, called the Royal Hive set. This would greatly buff allies and buggies around you, and we would additionally be able to get the Hive bow, which would shoot multiple arrows at once. We could also craft the honey staff, which would shoot sticky honey at enemies, and unlock honeycomb walls and decor for our base. Finally, we could craft the honey dispenser, which would give us a smoothie-like drink in the very safety of our own home. The Queen Bee would be such a cool addition to Grounded 2, and I just think it makes sense for realism's sake. I cannot wait to see if the devs finally add this to Grounded 2. Next on the list is the Lizard boss, which actually was technically in Grounded 1, but it was cut from the game. The developers were having a hard time making the fight feel rewarding for the player just because of how big it was, but it ended up being in a terrarium similar to Axel. However, it was in the shed in Grounded 1, but recent data miners for Grounded 2 have actually found out that yeah, the lizard is in the file for Grounded 2 as well, and you can actually spawn it in. If you want to see more on that, go check out JPG Crafted's video on that, where he showcases that. But I'm not sure we'll be fully getting this boss in Grounded 2, but we will see if they end up adding it. Now, as far as this thing's attacks against the player, I think it would have a belly flop attack, sort of where it jumps at you and flops down on you, because this thing is so much larger than us, as well as a bite attack, maybe a tail whip and smash attack would be cool as well. We know from Grounded 1 that they were planning on having this thing drop items to make dragon armor, as well as a spear, a massive shield made out of a scale from the lizard, and I think for Grounded 2 that it would probably be fighter type armor. So is the lizard coming to Grounded 2? We are not absolutely sure, but I think we have a good case for it. Next is a creature we have all heard about for Grounded 2, and that is the snake boss. Now there actually are models and animations in the Grounded 2 file, so something is going on for sure. You don't just add something to the files and make animations for it if you don't plan on using it in some way, shape, or form. So we know the snake is probably coming to Grounded 2, whether that is as a colossi in the new garden biome or a boss creature in general. It's very likely we will see the snake in Grounded 2. Now if they do decide to make this a boss creature for Grounded 2, it would have several attacks, including a bite attack, it would wrap around the player frequently, a tail whip attack, a tail smash attack, and it would have much more potent venom than any spider in the game. Once we finally defeat this boss, it would have a very strong venom weapon, probably the most potent in the game, a large snake scale shield, as well as a snake whip. This would likely be rogue armor that intimidates all other bugs, and has a set bonus effect called molting, where you shed negative status effects when you're low on health. Overall, I think we have an amazing chance of seeing the snake come to Grounded 2 in some way, shape, or form. Whether that is a boss or a colossi, I do not know, but I'm really excited to see what the devs do with this one. And finally, for the known creatures in Grounded 2, we have the Praying Mantis boss. Now, obviously we have the Praying Mantis nymph in the game, and we had the Orchid Mantis boss from Grounded 1, and according to my research, the Orchid Mantis is actually a smaller species of Praying Mantis compared to the green Praying Mantis that we have in Grounded 2. Because of that, I'm expecting this boss to be even bigger than the Orchid Mantis boss from Grounded 1. It would obviously have similar attacks to the Orchid Mantis as well as the Mantis Nymph, maybe jumping down from above as an ambush attack, some swipe and claw attacks, and a ground rush attack. Another cool idea is that 20% of the time you fight this boss, it could be infected by horsehair worms. These are parasitic worms that control Praying Mantis movements and behaviors. In a boss fight, this could be a really cool concept, as it would give the infected vibe from some of the creatures that we had in Grounded 1. Additionally, in the final stage of this parasitic boss fight, the Praying Mantis could come back to life as we see in cockroaches in Grounded 2. Now finally, as far as drops goes, we know that the nymph already drops items to make a mantis sword in Grounded 2, and we have mantis armor that is confirmed to be coming to Grounded 2 as well. I'm not sure whether the mantis armor will be dropped from the nymph or the Praying Mantis boss, but there is a good chance it would be from the adult Praying Mantis. I'd also like to see a Praying Mantis scythe similar to the weapons that we saw in Grounded 1. Overall, I think this creature definitely belongs in Grounded 2, and because we have the nymph, we absolutely need to see this guy make its way into the second game. Okay, we have now made it through all of the previously known bosses that could be coming to Grounded 2, and now we are stepping into more speculation territory. From here on out, we are going to divide the bosses up by biomes, starting with the pond biome. The first is the giant water bug boss. This is actually a community concept in the Grounded Discord from a guy named Magnum Kurisada. These are large underwater beetles that are apex predators that kill much larger animals than themselves, such as snakes and frogs. The way I would describe their hunting method is a mix between a scorpion and a praying mantis. They have these large front claws that grab in their prey and then they sting them with their powerful proboscis. Since the pond environment is going to be much larger and deeper than the pond from Grounded 1, picture we drop a summoning item into the deep dark abyss of water below us, and slowly arises from the depths the giant water bug. Attacks from this guy would look like a grab attack that pulls you into its stinger on its mouth. It could also grab us and throw us around, as well as swimming right past us super fast and pushing us back. As far as items go, when we kill this bad boy, it would drop items for us to make rogue armor. For utility, we could get a helmet that enhances our underwater vision, and the front arms of the boss could be made into dual sickles or scythes. I think this is a really cool boss idea, and I would love to see this come to Grounded 2. Next for the pond area is the Crayfish boss. This is a massive semi-aquatic crustacean that we would fight in a half underwater burrow as we swim down and come up to a massive underground, half water, half land boss arena. For attacks against the player, it would obviously have a pinch attack and a claw smash attack. This thing would dart backwards often, avoiding our attacks, and during the later stages of the fight, the arena would fill with water. When we end up defeating this boss, it would drop items to make heavy shellfish fighter armor. With this armor special effect being when the player is below half health, you would gain increased armor and shield stun. It would also drop items to make the claw hammer, the pincer fist gauntlets, and the crayfish harpoon. Another cool idea would be the ability to get a baby crayfish buggy from this boss fight. I think this could be a great optional boss for Grounded 2, but let's get out of the water and into the air. Introducing the Dragonfly boss, a massive boss tier dragonfly that flies above the cattails and the large grass strands of the pond. It would be cool to see this thing interacting with the environment and catching other bugs such as mosquitoes and bees, and attacks against the player would include a burst charge attack where it dashes straight at you, it could snatch up the player and drop them for some fall damage, and a massive bite attack. Once we finally defeat this thing, we could unlock the ability to get a dragonfly or damselfly buggy, as well as ranger type dragonfly armor. The helmet would have a really cool utility which highlights enemies and boosts critical damage, called the Hunter's Visor, as well as the ability to craft the Dragonfly Glider, which would essentially be a forward gliding dandelion tuft. We could also craft the Dragonfly Bow for increased damage versus flying bugs and prey type bugs, and the armor could potentially also be used for a glide suit. Finally, we might be able to craft some Dragonfly daggers from its mandibles. I think this would be such a cool boss for Grounded 2, and it makes a lot of sense to have this guy right above the pond biome. Now for the final boss in the water biome, we will be talking about the Bullfrog boss. This thing would be absolutely massive. It could even be classified as a colossi, but if it is going to be a boss, I think it would be cool if it was still developing from a tadpole. It could be guarding eggs as well, and the fight would be half on a lily pad and half in the water. For attacks, this guy would have a sticky tongue attack that pulls the player in, a massive belly flop attack, and a croak stun to stun the player. Obviously, it would also have a bite attack, but it could also summon tadpoles in the water during that portion of the fight. Now, when we finally beat this massive boss, it would drop items to make fighter type frog armor. It would also drop frog legs, giving the player a massive jump boost. And the set bonus of the frog armor would grant the player with a charged high jump, obviously accompanied by a cooldown. We could also craft a tongue whip from the frog tongue, a tongue trinket that auto-loots nearby bugs. It could also drop a vocal sack for sound-based items, such as the frog drum, the frog cannon, which would essentially be a sound cannon that stuns other bugs, and the croak horn to scare smaller bugs, acting as insect repellent. I think this is an obvious addition for the pond environment and would absolutely add so much character to it, and so we need to see this as soon as possible. Okay, now the following few bosses would be found in the canopy environment. This would be a new biome at the very top of the tree where all sorts of tree-dwelling insects and creatures would live. The first boss on this list for the canopy biome would be the tree frog boss. This would be similar to the frog, however it would be adapted to live in the trees. It would be smaller than the larger bullfrog, and we would fight it high up near the top of the tree. It'd have a very sticky tongue attack, a bite attack, and a high-pitched croak that would slow us, similar to the dust effect from Grounded 1. We would easily get stuck in the frog slime that it would leave behind when it moved or hopped around. As far as items go from defeating this boss, it would drop items to make light rogue armor, and the tree frog vocal sack for making different music items, such as the flute to put other bugs to sleep. We would also get items to make the sticky bug net, a net to trap bugs near our base, the sticky grapple for us to grapple up to higher places, and the sticky gloves for climbing a small vertical distance. Overall, I think this biome and boss would be a great addition to Grounded 2. Next on the canopy list would be the Gecko boss. I see this boss residing in the higher tier tree, which is the pine tree in the top left side of the map. Obviously, it would have to be a smaller gecko in order to not be considered a colossi, but there are many geckos that are similar in size to an adult praying mantis. It would be cool if it lived near the top of the pine tree and then ventured down to climb on the walls in different areas. However, it would only be able to be engaged at the top of the pine tree where its boss arena would be. It would have a claw swipe attack, a bite attack, and a massive tail slam attack. It would also shed its tail as a decoy near the later stages of the fight, and have a wall pounce attack where it jumped on you from the walls of the arena. Once we defeat it, it would drop items to craft rogue camouflage armor, allowing all bugs to become neutral to us. The set bonus of this armor would also shed a decoy tail that enemies automatically aggro to when we get below 25% health. Weapons would include a tail club, sticky claw daggers which apply a slow, and sticky gecko shells for decor. I think this boss would work great for the canopy environment as a mid to late tier boss in Grounded 2. Now moving on to the underground environment, one great addition would be the mole boss. This would be a random event boss when exploring underground. You would hear a loud rumbling and your screen would shake like an earthquake as this thing pops out and slams you into a boss arena, almost grabbing you with the tendrils on its face, resulting in a crazy jump scare. It would have a souped up version of the burrow attack like the scorpion, a side tunnel charge, a collapsing dirt attack that slows the player as dirt falls from the ceiling, claw and swipe attacks, as well as low visibility dirt clouds. When we finally defeat this thing, it would drop items to make fighter mole armor, and a mole helmet that lets you see other close tunnels through walls. The set bonus would grant the player night vision underground, and we would be able to craft the mole shredder fist weapon. Alongside this, we could make the two-handed mole hammer from mole bones that emits a massive AoE earth shock when it hits the ground. Finally, we could get the mole nose trinket that would make it way easier to sniff out nearby treasures. This boss would be a great addition to Grounded 2, allowing for a really fun jump scare while exploring underground. This next boss is an absolute fan favorite, and it is the Centipede boss. We would encounter this boss while exploring through underground tunnels lined with large dead bugs. And finally, we would enter the lair graveyard of the Centipede boss. This boss would use frequent bite attacks and wrap tightly around the player. It would also have highly potent venom and attacks that cause bleed damage. Additionally, it would include a burrow attack and climb on the walls and ceilings of the boss arena. Finally, it would have a screech attack to break player blocks and parries. After defeating this boss, it would drop items to make the Scuttle Armor, a max mobility and stamina rogue armor set. To accompany this, we could craft the Centipede Daggers, which would apply bleed and venom damage, as well as the Centipede Greatsword, which would be slow and also cause venom and bleed damage. Finally, we could craft the Chitin Crusher Hammer to deal extra damage to armored enemies such as roly-polies and scorpions. Overall, this is a fan favorite and we absolutely need this boss in the game. I think it would be really cool to have a graveyard boss concept. Moving on to the now confirmed garden biome, the first boss would be the Garden Toad. Hidden just below the surface of a massive compost heap, the Garden Toad would slowly rise up and jump out, starting a fight against the player. It would have a sticky tongue pull-in attack, a body slam attack, as well as a tongue whip attack. Its back legs would kick up mud and dirt, slowing the player down. Its tongue would also leave long slime trails that slows the player as well. Near the later stages of the fight, its armored skin would reflect melee and status effect damage back onto the player. Once we finally defeat it, it would drop items to craft fighter armor with high defense that reflects status effects back on enemies. We could also make a tongue flail weapon to slow and crush, as well as a toad staff that casts sticky toad slime to slow enemies. And finally, we would also get sticky slime toad bombs to slow down enemies and creatures alike. This would add a lot of variety to the garden biome and would be a mini jump scare as the player has to fend off a massive toad. Next for the garden is the Carnivorous Plant boss. Now this could either be a Venus flytrap boss or a pitcher plant boss or even both. But these would be potted plants near the corner or back neglected area of the greenhouse, and they would both be holding legendary weapons in their mouths. Because let's be honest, you'd have to be stupid to walk right into the mouth of a Venus flytrap. But in order to get these weapons, we would have to go into the mouth, grab the weapon, and be swallowed alive. Now after we have been swallowed, we would fight half-digested, infected-looking bugs and acidic attacks from the plant itself. The player would have to fend off waves and eventually destroy weak points or enzyme nodes on the inside of the plant to have it spasm and spit us back out with the legendary weapon. For the Venus flytrap, this weapon would be called the Maw, and it would be a chomping type living weapon that shoots out a large mouth and brings bugs back to you, slowing them and dealing acidic damage. For the pitcher plant, this weapon would be called the Resin Spitter. It would fire acidic goo that slows and does acid damage to nearby bugs and creatures. And finally, as far as utility and other items to craft, we would be able to make the Venus Bug Trap to trap bugs near our base, and the Lure Trap that would lure bugs in and trap them in a sticky goo. I almost feel like these are absolutely necessary to make the upcoming garden biome feel unique but also dangerous to the player. Moving on to the spider bosses, I know we have already so many spiders in Grounded 2, but we need to make sure we flesh out every possible boss that could come to Grounded 2, so let's get right into it. Starting with the Huntsman Spider. So many people have been asking for this, and I know a lot of people are like, oh, they live in Australia. Well, there actually are quite a few species that live here in the US as well. These guys are actually a bit longer than tarantulas. They have longer legs than a tarantula, but they have a much smaller body. They're very fast moving, and I think they would function pretty similarly to a much larger wolf spider. They are nocturnal though, so these guys are going to hunt you at night, which is horrifying. But I am absolutely down for this to be a roaming boss. I think it should have the fastest attacks in Grounded 2 because these spiders are really quick and they are expert hunters. Attacks against the player would include a grab and crush attack with its massive mandibles, a pounce attack, and obviously the horrible combo attacks that we see from all spider variants. It would also include bite attacks and a frenzy when it gets low on health, dealing increased venom damage and much faster attacks. When we finally kill this thing, we would get items to make Huntsman Spider Rogue Armor, which would allow for more frequent dashes, and the Huntsman Fangs, which would be the fastest daggers in Grounded 2, and they would deal bleed and venom damage. I used to be against this one before I learned that they actually do live in the US, so I would love to see the Huntsman Spider come to Grounded 2. The next and final spider boss would be the Trapdoor Spider. These are predatory spiders that hunt by opening a trapdoor from underneath its prey and dragging it in. They would be slightly larger than a wolf spider and would open up a trapdoor and drag players in with a one-shot kill unless you perfect parry. However, we would be able to lure it out by throwing spider bait on top of its trapdoor. Once we have lured it out or been dragged into its boss lair, it would attack the player with crushing bites, quick dashes, and deadly combos. I'm guessing once we square up against this guy, we would actually be able to take it on fairly easily. And so when we finally defeat it, we would be able to craft Rogue Armor that raises the damage when we ambush enemies. We would also be able to craft Trapdoor Daggers and a pike that would grant invisibility when charging. Finally, items dropped from this boss would allow us to make trapdoors for our bases and pitfall traps around our base to defend from other bugs. This is a great boss to add to Grounded 2 for some character and some fun jump scares. This next boss is sort of a comical, funny boss, but I think it would really add a lot of character to the game. We have bosses from Grounded 1 like the Mantis that aren't necessarily realistic bosses, but they added a lot to the story, and I think this would be one of those type of bosses. And this would be the Aphid boss. So when Max, one of the 4 teens, sees an Aphid for the first time, he actually has this line where he talks about an alpha Aphid.
Hey, Aphid! I wonder if there's an alpha Aphid. Isolated by power from the rest, slowly going crazy.
And I think they should absolutely expand on this and make this into a full-blown boss. This would be a very large, aggressive aphid with massive ram-like horns. I'm not sure where they would put this in the map yet, but I think they would be able to figure it out. When attacking the player, it would summon aggressive aphids, ram into the player, scream to stun the player, and finally jump and slam into the ground for a large shockwave type damage. After beating this boss, it would drop items to make the Alpha Aphid set, and this would be a typeless set, but it would come with the Aphid Slippers Plus. So this would just be a more enhanced version of the Aphid Slippers, but would allow us to move quite a bit quicker. It would also drop the items to craft the Aphid Staff, which summons aggressive aphids, and this would just be hilarious. Imagine just shooting aggressive aphids at your friends and other bugs. They wouldn't be that strong, but I guess you could make a really cool aphid build with this. And of course, we would get the Aphid Horn Daggers, crafted from the horns of the giant aphid boss, and these would have lower damage than normal daggers, but would have infinite stamina. Finally, as a nod to Grounded 1, we could get the Aphid Pet from the boss. I don't think they're going to be adding pets to Grounded 2, so this would be a cool nod to Grounded 1, just to have an Aphid Pet that boosts how fast we can run. Overall, I think this would be a great story type boss, and it would add so much character to Grounded 2. Now moving on, another unique type boss. This is going to be near the garbage bags, and it is going to be the Horsefly boss. A horsefly is a large aggressive fly species, and this guy would fly around high above the trash bags. It would be really fast, and we would be able to hear it from quite a ways away. Obviously, it would be very aggressive. Attacks would look like charging at the player to latch on and steal HP for a few seconds with its giant proboscis. It would shoot acid trash globs at the player, zoom past the player really fast to push them away with the wind. It would have bite attacks and would have a very loud, annoying buzzing sound going on during the boss fight. When you finally kill this guy, we would get items to craft a Dark Mage set. This set would be based around lifesteal attacks, and we would be able to craft the Undead Staff, which would leech life away from enemies over time, giving it back to the player. Alongside this, we would be able to make a trinket that boosts lifesteal in general, and we would get some cool blood-themed decor like lamps. I think this is a great way to make use of a pretty useless feeling area of the map like the garbage bags, and I think it would be a great addition to Grounded 2. Moving on to the ice cream truck, I was actually surprised that this was not in the game on release, but we would be looking at the scorpion boss. It is actually already in the concept art a massive frozen scorpion that the player sees frozen in this giant open ice cave. It would be cool if as we got closer we saw the eyes moving and then it just breaks out of the ice and absolutely attacks us out of nowhere. Located in a giant ice cavern, this scorpion would have a ice sting attack which would freeze us in one hit, a claw grab and crush attack, a pinch attack, some cool scorpion combo attacks, obviously a burrow attack into the ice, and a massive tail slam. When we finally defeat this boss, we would be able to get items to craft the Frostbreaker set. This would be rogue armor that has a frozen thorns effect, so whenever enemies hit us, it would deal chilling damage back to them, eventually freezing them. We would also be able to craft the Ice Shurikens, the Scorpion King Club, and the Cryo Venom Staff, which does a mix between venom and chill damage. Finally, we would get a throwable one-hit freeze orb that we could use to freeze enemies at will. Overall, I think this is definitely coming to the game at some point since it is in the concept art, but I think we need to see it as soon as possible. Next on the list is a duo boss. This would be the Atlas and Luna Moth boss. Now these are some of the biggest moths in the world, and I think they would make an absolutely awesome duo boss, with the Atlas Moth being the fire moth and the Luna Moth being the ice moth. They would be located in the pergola, which is actually already in the game. If you look off in the distance in the out of bounds zone, you can see this massive pergola with a frisbee throwing disc on top. These would obviously be flying bosses, and they would all have different attacks. Now the Atlas Moth would attack with fiery gusts of wind, flame dust that ignites as it falls on the player, and melee burn attacks. Where the Luna Moth would attack with a chilling wind, a frozen trail of shards that freeze as they fall, and it would shoot projectiles with a one-hit freeze, similar to the Scorpion boss. In the final stage, they would attack together in a yin and yang type fashion, making it really hard to counter this boss with just one player. However, once you finally take down this boss, there would be 3 mage armor sets that you would be able to craft: the Atlas set, the Luna set, and the Twilight set. The Atlas set would be the ultimate fire wizard set, with the staff being able to cast a fire meteor-like projectile from the sky, dealing fire damage and exploding damage. The armor would grant full immunity to and boost sizzle damage as well. For the Luna set, it would be the ultimate ice set, including a staff that casts long-range freezing mist that slows enemies and freezes them over time. The armor would grant full immunity to freeze and boost freezing damage as well. Now for the Twilight set, it would be a mix of the fire and ice type sets in a yin-yang fashion, the ultimate fusion wizard type set with a staff that casts frostburn wind with fire projectiles and cold mist at the same time. Obviously the damage output would be a little less than using one or the other, but it would deal both sizzle and freeze damage. Finally, the Twilight Cloak would grant absolute immunity to all sizzle or freeze type damage, being one of the most unique and useful armors in the game. I think this boss duo would be so cool to add to Grounded 2. We've never seen a duo boss before in Grounded, and I think it absolutely fits right into the map if they add it right on top of the pergola as a late game boss fight. Now moving on to the flower bed, we have a very unique but fitting type boss for Grounded 2, the Monarch Butterfly. This would be found in the flower bed atop a very tall flower with leaves in a spiral allowing you to jump to the top, and a massive flower at the top in full bloom creating a boss arena. As you get closer to the top, dreamy particles would be falling from the sky and surround the arena as well. Against the player, this boss would specialize in debuffing with sleep and stun power attacks. It would fly over the player with sleep dust to put them to sleep, as well as flying over the player with stun spore to paralyze them. Now if you're thinking what I'm thinking, yes, this thing would pretty much be be Grounded 2's Butterfree from Pokemon. It would also have a Wing Gust knockback attack, as well as a drain attack that slowly drains a player's stamina and does damage over time. When we finally defeat this boss, it would drop items to make the Mage Monarch armor. This would make all status effects double and take damage over time. This would also allow us to craft the Dreambinder staff that fires golden sleep power, putting any enemy to sleep for a short time, as well as the Stormvein staff that fires lightning strikes to stun enemies, and I think it would be cool if you were able to hold the stun on the enemy as long as the lightning strike was still connected to the staff, kind of like how spells work in Harry Potter. Finally, you would get a trinket that extends all debuffs by 50%. This boss would be a really unique boss for Grounded 2 and would make the flower bed in the garden biome such a cool experience for the player. We will now be moving on to the free roaming bosses for Grounded 2, starting off with the Velvet Ant, also known as the Cow Killer. These are actually wingless wasps that look like a bright red ant and have a super painful sting. I think they would wander near the sandy areas of the map, and against the player, their sting attacks would cause a new debuff called Pain. This would make your vision blurry and make damage feel very amplified with sound and visual effects, making everything disorienting for the player, causing your attacks to occasionally miss and your movements to be opposite of your normal controls. The Velvet Ant would have a burrow attack, a crush attack with its pincers, and in the last phase of the fight, it would double in speed and all of its attacks would deal the Pain debuff. Now when you defeat this thing, it would drop items to make the Cow Killer set that deals bonus damage against enemies with the Pain debuff. This would be a rogue type armor. Alongside this, we would be able to craft the Stinger Pike that over time applies more pain to disorient bugs, the Stinger Daggers which apply pain every third hit, slowly incapacitating enemies, and the Cow Killer Trinket which increases your attack and movement speed when killing an enemy with pain. I think this would be a great roaming boss. If you ran into this thing, you would get absolutely destroyed your first time, but I think it would really be a good addition for Grounded 2. Next on the list for the roaming bosses is the Assassin Bug boss. It is a large hunting bug that injects its prey with venom and liquefies them from the inside out. This would be found in a secluded bug graveyard with half-decayed bugs that are slowly deteriorating from the assassin bug's acid. Against the player, this boss would apply a debuff called Liquefy that would reduce armor over time. Some of its attacks would include slashing attacks, latching onto a player and stealing HP while also applying Liquefy, briefly cloaking itself, turning invisible, and jumping on the player, and in the last phase, the boss could glow in eerie green while all of its attacks applied the Liquefy debuff. After finally defeating this boss, it would drop items to craft the Assassin's Shroud, which would allow full invisibility when crouching. This would be a rogue type armor, and accompanying this would be the Grim Scythe, which hits multiple enemies and applies the Liquefied debuff, and its killing blow creates a splash blood burst of healing. We would also be able to craft the Proboscis Pike that applies Liquefy over time, and when attacking, thrust out and pulls creatures back in for a burst of lifesteal. Finally, we could craft the Shroud Trinket, which applies Liquefy on the first hit if you hit an enemy while invisible. Overall, I think this is a super unique boss and would add a lot of character to the game. I know a lot of people in the community are asking for this boss, and so I also want to see this come to Grounded 2. Next on the roaming boss suggestions is the Hercules Beetle. This is a giant horned beetle that would be roaming throughout the park, smashing through obstacles, and when enraged, tearing up terrains like breaking grass and logs around it. This thing would be so much larger than the player that we would have to get creative with some of its attacks. And so when it comes to attacking the player, it would use its giant horn to swing at the player like a massive tree trunk. It would also charge through terrain, breaking everything around it and flinging the player back. It would occasionally slam into the ground, causing a massive earthquake, and to players who get too close, it would scoop you up with its horn and fling you far away. Now, in the final phase of this boss fight, it would become enraged, with its eyes glowing and the ground cracking all around it. In addition, all of its attacks during this phase would emit shockwaves like a massive titan towering above us. As far as items go after defeating this massive boss, we would have the ability to make the Juggernaut set. This would be the strongest fighter armor in the game, and would make perfect block attacks launch enemies back. It would also have a shield that when blocking enemies would make a small earth shockwave, which would be the largest shield in the game. Additionally, we would get the Herculean Great Axe that deals massive damage and knocks enemies back, and the Colossus Club, which would be the strongest club in the game but very slow, including a charge slam attack that would make small earthquakes. Overall, I think this guy absolutely belongs in the game and would be a very unique Titan-like boss to face in Grounded 2, and I'm all for it. Finally, when it comes to roaming bosses, this list would not be complete without the Tarantula Hawk Wasp. This is a tarantula-sized wasp that paralyzes and lays eggs within tarantulas and other spiders too. Now, these spiders are still alive, and when the babies hatch, they actually eat the spider from the inside out. In Grounded 2, these guys would live in a cavern near a sandy area with paralyzed spiders lining the floor that every once in a while will twitch to make sure we know they're still alive. This boss would actually be neutral until attacked by the player, but would always prioritize spiders in any fight. It would also have a ranged venom spit attack that can temporarily stop stamina regen, several bite attacks, and a dive bomb sting attack that can paralyze nearby buggies and players. When we finally beat this boss, it would drop items to create the Predator Ranger type armor, which increases damage against spiders and allows faster dodging, as well as the Hawkeye bow that allows bow shots to have a 5% chance to paralyze enemies, as well as a spear that allows for the same effect. We could also use its massive wings to craft a helicopter-like vehicle to traverse the map quickly. Overall, I absolutely want to see this thing in Grounded 2. It's a huge community suggestion and would pair very well with Axel the Tarantula. I think it brings a great uniqueness to the game as a roaming boss, and would be an absolutely horrifying boss fight. Now that there wraps up all the bosses we have to cover today, but there is one bonus that I would like to go over, and that is the Broodmother boss. Now, it's not likely that this would be a boss for Grounded 2, however, it was a boss in Grounded 1, and in the files we can clearly see that there is a Broodmother Buggy. Now, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't develop something that I'm not going to put in the game, or at least think about putting in the game, and therefore we know that the Broodmother Buggy is going to play some sort of role for Grounded 2. Whether that's the stranger riding this buggy, or this being a roaming creature we can tame in Grounded 2, I am all here for it. Now that officially wraps up the entire list of bosses that we are going over in today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to see more content like this, make sure to leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss out. My name's Schmix, and I'll see you in the next video.